Good evening. I'll call to order the April 19th, 2021 meeting of the Arvada City Council. Call upon Council Member Lauren Simpson.
Thank you. Would you please join me for a moment of silence? And now please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kristen Rush, if you'll do the roll call.
Mayor Williams.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Miller.
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Here.
Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Councilmember Marriott.
Here.
Councilmember Simpson.
Here.
Okay, we have the approval of the minutes of April 5th. Are there any changes or corrections? Seeing none, they will stand approved as presented. Next, we have a recognition of the Lions Club of Arvada, and we've got a couple representatives if you want to come to the podium. And Mr. Pfeiffer will read the proclamation, and Mr. Jones will be our stand-in in terms of, and besides, he's one of the more handsome of the guys to have the picture taken, so. Of the guys, I said of the guys.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and start. The Lions Club of Arvada marks their 75th year of service. The Lions Club of Arvada was chartered on April 29, 1946 by the International Association of Lions Clubs. They are sponsored by the Golden Lions Club under President Ron Prishin. Arvada's first president was Harold Peterson. There were 32 members on the chartered night. In that first year, the club raised over $1,000 for community projects. As with most service clubs, the Lions have struggled over the years, but are looking forward to a year of renewal. They're continuing to collect used eyeglasses for various retail locations around Arvada. At the onset of the pandemic, the Lions provided masks and used clothes to the Rising Church for the homeless. They also collected money for the community table. The Lions Club of Arvada continues to support the nation's causes of childcare, cancer, diabetes, and hunger. Thank you for all showing up today. I appreciate it. Sorry I can't be there in person. I'm glad you all did. David Jones will come down and present you with a Lions Club of Arvada in recognition of 75 years of anniversary, acknowledging and honoring its years of service to the Arvada community. Presented this 19th day of April, 2021, signed by the Mayor and all City Council. Thank you very much for coming out here, and as soon as he takes a picture for you, if you'd like to say a few words, you are more than welcome to. And again, thank you, Mr. Jones, for doing that for me today.
Did you get our smiles?
Great.
Just want to thank the council.
Well, thank the Lions. Go ahead.
I'm Dr. Doyle Beavers, and been a dentist here in Arvada for 54 years and retired 5 years ago. So I've been a Lion since 1962, came out in 1961, so I've been around Arvada for a while, and I appreciate City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to the Lions Club. You've all been great participants. We're so beneficial in Arvada to have great service organizations, and we certainly count the Lions Club as one of those that really help fill an important need in our community. So thank you. Okay, for public comment, I've got Michael Civitano. If you'll come down to the podium. And you can remove your mask if you would like while you're speaking.
I also have documents here, if I could hand those to you.
Yep.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Michael Civitano. I live at 5743 Teller Street, right across from St. Anne's Catholic School. Since moving to this apartment, I've noticed an uptick in alarming and dangerous persons by those two porta potties, which are by McElvoy Park. That's 30 feet from the children's playground, which is frequented heavily, and this is 15 feet from essentially my front door. I've noticed repeatedly on-end drug dealing occurring at these porta potties, open air, people shooting up open air, as well as people drunk, throwing bottles, which you can see there in that photo as well, and vomiting on the hand washing station, which was yesterday right in front of myself and my girlfriend. These porta potties, in my opinion, present a danger to the people living in the apartments. I've had numerous attempts for people trying to break in. You can cross-reference this with the Arvada City Police Department, where I've had to call them. From that point, it's mentally ill people screaming at 3 a.m. to kill them, to hurt them, and then, again, coming and knocking on our windows, peering in my window. I was told these toilets were meant for COVID-19 response, which I understand, but judging by these photos that I shared with you today, as unsettling as they are, it obviously creates a meeting spot and hangout where people are doing things they shouldn't be. And so from this point, if you look at one of the photos there was a red wrapper on the floor that was a used open condom wrapper, and I'll let the council kind of come to their own conclusions what that was doing there. In conjunction with the house that's right across the street or across the way that's scheduled to be demolished, recently the Arvada City Police Department had to respond to a woman who was looting there, and it turned into a squatting house where homeless people broke the windows and then went inside the building. It finally got boarded up, and in conjunction with this and the broken window theory, it's been equaling together. I just request that these porta potties be removed just because of the hazard to children nearby and the fact that there are bystanders there and the other apartment folks that I live with. They've had it as well, people beating on their windows, peering into their windows, and it's disconcerting. And if not, I ask this, would you utilize those restrooms and commodes? Would you feel comfortable if you have children or grandchildren using those commodes? I think I can answer for everyone here that it would be pretty uncomfortable, and especially with the persons that hang out around there, you would not want anyone to be around there. And then just finally, usually walking our dogs, I've noticed an uptick in a lot more, I guess you could say, homeless persons, a lot more mentally ill persons coming up to my girlfriend, who sometimes, due to work, I'm in the tech industry, I can't be there, and so she'll be outside walking the dogs, and people will come up at night, seemingly from the porta potties or just hanging around that building and come up and beg for money, and it makes her uncomfortable, especially since, she has 2 dogs in her hands, and there's nowhere really to go. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention. If these porta potties could be removed to somewhere, put some more high visibility, so that way, if there is any of those shenanigans going on, it could be put to a stop right away.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. What we'll do is our city manager will have a discussion with our police chief and our parks folks in terms of this issue. Thank you for bringing this to our attention with,
Thank you for having me.
unfortunately, some pretty dramatic photographs. Kristen Rush, do we have anybody else that signed up to speak?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, under new business, we have a few items on the consent agenda. The first is a resolution authorizing the issuance of a purchase order in the amount of a little over $416,000 with Silver Harbor Motors, Inc. for the purchase of 5 2021 Ford Police Interceptor utility vehicles and 6 Ford Police F-150 Special Service vehicles. Next is a resolution authorizing an agreement by and between the City of Arvada and Colorado Golf and Turf, Inc. for lease of golf carts and utility vehicles at the Westwoods Golf Club and the Lake Arbor Golf Club, financed through Exchange Bank. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that Resolution R21-067 and R21-068 both be approved.
Motions for approval. Mr. Pfeiffer, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ford?
yes,
And we have 5 yes votes in council chambers as well. That passes unanimously. One comment I'll make is that I saw that these golf carts can be adapted to GPS. I will continue to advocate for that. When our neighboring competitor golf courses have that, seems like we ought to have it too. So, next we have a resolution, R21-069, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement by and between the City of Arvada and the Arvada Urban Renewal Authority to complete the .04 Denver Tramway Streetcar Site Development Project. Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we are indeed fortunate to partner with the Arvada Urban Renewal Authority, ORA, who is providing funding for the development of and construction of a of the site to display the .04 trolley. This will help bring to conclusion an effort that was undertaken by a group known as the Friends of the .04 Trolley. The Denver, also in collaboration with the Denver Tramway Heritage and Colorado Preservation, in order to fund the refurbishment and restoration of the .04 trolley. This trolley is listed in the Colorado State Register of Historical Places. We were instrumental, our team was instrumental. Stephen Padilla, our grants manager, was instrumental in working with the Colorado Historic Preservation Group to develop the funding for the restoration of the trolley, and now with the through the efforts of the Friends of the .04 trolley as well as ORA, we now have a place to display the trolley, which is on the east side of the Grandview Bridge, and we are certainly recommending. We've had a lot of community engagement around this this whole project, and we are recommending approval of the resolution in order to bring this project to a very good conclusion and get that historical asset displayed for our community.
Very good. Does anyone have any questions before Ms. Ford makes a motion? Seeing none, Ms. Ford, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make the motion, and then I'm going to speak to the motion. I move that our 21-069, an intergovernmental agreement by and between the City of Arvada and the Arvada Urban Renewal Authority to complete the .04 Denver Tramway Streetcar Site Development Project be approved. And as a member of the .04 Trolley, one of the members of the .04 Trolley Committee, we just want to thank the Urban Renewal Authority for this generous offer. We're all very excited to see this streetcar come to life on Grandview, and it'll be a source of enjoyment, we believe, for many years for those who love history. And so I just want you to know that we're all very appreciative of this gift.
Very good. If council would please vote. Ms. Ford, how do you vote on your motion?
I vote yes.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
I also want to thank the Urban Renewal for their contribution to the preservation of our history. So again, I want to mimic some of Ms. Ford's comments. So I will be voting yes.
And the remainder of council and chambers votes yes as well. That passes 7-0. Yes, I think we're fortunate to have a good partnership with the Urban Renewal Authority. Urban Renewal Authorities sometimes get a bad name, but this is a perfect example of where they're able to take the funds that they've generated and put it to good public use, not only in terms of removing blight, but also to enhance areas. So that is a good outcome. Next, we have a ratification and approval of CP 2021-0002, a resolution by the Planning Commission for the City of Arvada, Colorado, adopting the 2014 Arvada Comprehensive Plan as Arvada's 3-mile plan pursuant to Section 31-12-105-1E of Colorado Revised Statutes. So I'm glad to see that we're finally getting around to adopting a 2014 plan. Mr. Devin, you can probably explain why that's happening that way.
Well, the reference to 2014, I believe, is the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So we've already adopted that.
Right.
This is the adoption of the 3-mile plan, and the reference to the 2014 comprehensive plan is that plan really acts as our 3-mile plan.
That's a good explanation.
Yes, thank you. So this is ratifying the action of the Planning Commission, which is one of these kind of housekeeping items that we have to do each year to basically articulate property annexations and those kinds of actions. During this previous year, we did not annex any property, but that was more than 3 miles from the city boundary, and we don't have a plan to do so within the next year. So we're recommending approval of the Planning Commission's, or ratification, I should say, of the Planning Commission's action.
Very good. Open it up for council questions or action. Mr. Marriott.
If there are no questions, I'll make a motion here.
You may.
So I move that.
Oh, Bob raised his hand first.
Sorry, John. I just have a quick question. So for Mark Devon, just curious here, when you say no more than 3 miles, what about the infill areas? Does that count towards it? And then the other question I have is, how does this play into Dr. Cog's urban growth boundaries? I'm sure there's some rules around that. Do they contradict each other, or do they complement each other?
Yeah.
Do you know?
So Bob, it is consistent with with Dr. Cog's urban boundaries, urban growth boundaries, because our comprehensive plan is. And I'm sorry, sir, I didn't catch your first question.
You made me forget it.
It was about how does the 3 mile limit pertain to our infill?
You got that?
The infill area.
So Councilmember Pfeiffer, infill areas, if they're not something that's it has to be more than 3 miles from our current boundary for this to kind of kick in. Infill areas are going to be what's called an enclave. And so when we're looking at this particular set of statutes, it's not going to come into play, the infill areas in this particular 3 mile plan.
So all these little Swiss cheese of pockets don't play into this.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that CP 2021-0002, a resolution by the Planning Commission for the City of Arvada, Colorado, adopting the 2014 Arvada Comprehensive Plan as Arvada's 3 mile plan pursuant to Section 31-12-1051E CRS as amended be ratified and approved. This motion is based on the finding of fact adopted by the Planning Commission.
Motions for approval and ratification. We've got 5 yes votes in council chambers. Mr. Pfeiffer, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ford?
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Thank you. Okay, we drug that out just long enough that we can open the public hearings. Council Bill 21013, an ordinance repealing and reenacting Article 6 of Chapter 38, Environment of the Arvada City Code. Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we have Deputy Director of Vibrant Community and Neighborhoods, Anessa Janes, who's going to present this item to you because we think that you probably want to listen to somebody other than me sometimes.
Thank you, Mr. Devon. Good evening, council members and mayor. The Arvada team is requesting an update to City Code Section 38-241 and 38-242, as well as the addition of 38-243, 38-244, and 38-245. So this proposed code update really centers around 4 key objectives. So first, as currently written, the city code does not provide city personnel with the clarity or the flexibility necessary to respond quickly to hazards presented by infestation of pests. So for example, the emerald ash borer. The proposed code change will ensure that city personnel can act quickly to mitigate infestations and perform other necessary maintenance to landscaping on and encroaching onto city property. So second, this code update will also provide clarity on the options available to the city team in order to deal with private property installments on city property that pose a hazard to the public safety or a hindrance to maintenance of public spaces. So these installments might include things like horseshoe pits, gardens, finished landscaping, trees, and irrigation systems. So third, the city code as it's currently written does not provide guidance on the city's authority to maintain certain landscaping and installations. So by amending the code, the city team members will be able to provide clear and improved communication, guidance, and customer service. And lastly, the proposed code update adds a municipal violation for citizens who remove city trees without permission. So this addition gives the police the option to charge an offender in municipal court rather than charging a higher misdemeanor or felony level criminal mischief. So the code revision will allow the city to seek restitution as the victim of a crime and allows for a more proportional outcome for the offender's action. So the intent of the proposed updates to the code is to allow for a faster response time and greater level of customer service with regard to city maintained landscaping, privately owned landscaping hanging over city property, and privately owned personal property installed on city property. So the changes also aim for a greater level of clarity when handling sensitive issues, such as the removal of resident installed landscaping on city property or the unauthorized removal of city trees. So further, the updates are designed to allow our team to respond more effectively and efficiently to hazards facing our community from nuisance and invasive pests, including the emerald ash borer, mountain pine beetle, and the Kermes scale. So tonight we have our city forester, Ian McDonald, in attendance, as well as Assistant City Attorney Kylie Justice. And they're both here to answer any questions you might have tonight about this item.
Very good. Is there any member of the public that would like to address City Council on this matter? Ms. Rush, do you have anybody signed up?
We do not.
Okay, I'll close the public comment portion. Open it up for City Council questions or action. Yes, Nancy, Ms. Ford?
Mayor, I have a question for someone in the parks area. I wanted to find out whether or not, or how popular horseshoe pits were in our parks. You know, it was interesting to see that as a potential hazard. Where I come from, horseshoe pits are usually utilized by community members, are often the source of great games and great enjoyment and competition. And I was wondering if that's something that we have currently in our parks. Is it something that has been asked for by our constituents?
Nessa, do you want to handle that or pass it off to one of your team members?
Yeah, I can handle that. I was fumbling with the mute button. So Councilmember Ford, thank you for your question. You know, we do have horseshoe pits in our parks, and every now and then we get requests from the public to install their own. And really the intent of this code rewrite is to make sure, you know, that there's alignment between where new amenities, you know, are being placed in our parks and where we have them already. Would either Kylie Justice or Ian McDonald like to elaborate on my answer, or is there anything that I missed as you guys were working through kind of this code rewrite and the details there?
You're muted. There you go.
Can you hear me?
We can now.
So to clarify, as Anessa said, we do have horseshoe pits that have been installed for public use, but this is more for those that are being installed without city permission and are a hindrance to maintenance operations.
And the reason why I'm asking the question is because I'm wondering if people are installing them without city permission, is this a need that could be addressed by parks that we're not addressing?
I mean, I certainly could see people wanting horseshoe pits. Obviously, they're installing them. So I don't know if I have the authority to answer that question as to whether we should install more throughout our park system, but I certainly enjoy a good game of horseshoes. So.
Well, they're a very inexpensive game. I think this is what kind of makes me think about this. They're very inexpensive to build, right? And yet they're a tremendous source of fun. I know a lot of people who do competitive horseshoes. So it was just a thought. It's not a big deal. Shouldn't take a lot of serious discussion, but I'm wondering if people are installing horseshoe pits, if we are not providing enough for our citizens, and that maybe we need to provide more in our parks and provide that as an opportunity, because it's a great game for older people.
Okay, we've got a couple more team members who have joined the Zoom screen here. If either one of them want to add anything more on this.
Good evening, council members. I was just going to chime in that really the intent behind the specific provision or addition to the code is just to prevent, my understanding is that there's kind of a rumor among some residents that by taking over a certain amount of city property that over a period of time they could adversely possess it, which is not true. But I guess this statute is just to give a course of action for park members to be able to serve notice, to let them know, hey, this is actually on city property. You could just move it back to your property line, or we're going to have to remove it in the event we had to like mow through that area or something along those lines.
Yeah, I want you all to understand, I get the purpose of the ordinance. I'm not confused about the ordinance. I'm simply bringing up the concept of horseshoes in our parks and whether or not it's an actual game that we're not providing or could be providing that is being asked for by our residents. That's the question. Is it something that we don't have that people want? I haven't heard about it, but maybe others have heard that people would like to have those horseshoe pits in the parks in order to have competitive games.
And Councilmember Ford, this is Gordon Rissing, Director of ECN, and I would say yes in answer to your question. We have two ways of placing horseshoes in our parks. One is in the original design, and we have that neighborhood engagement, that feedback. The second way is sometimes when a resident comes to City Council, but most often when the resident comes to the Park Advisory Committee, which advises the City Council on amenities that can be added to a park after it's been constructed. And so the answer is yes. In both respects, we have horseshoe pits in our parks now. And one of the things our Park Advisory Committee loves to work with the neighborhood on is the creation of additional amenities that are timely and really needed and wanted by the neighborhood. And in that regard, if there is a desire for a neighborhood to create a horseshoe pit, the greatest way to do that is to approach the City Council and Park Advisory Committee, and then we'd be able to help them.
Thank you, Gordon. That answers my question.
That's great. Ms. Simpson.
Thank you. So my question is actually in regards to 38-244, injuring or removing trees on city property. I'm very pleased that we're looking for a more equitable outcome for this kind of activity or crime as opposed to criminal mischief and then a felony offense. That seems a little disproportionate for the nature of the crime of removing a tree. However, I wanted to get a little clarity on the city seeking compensation. So would it be in the sense that it's like a speeding ticket where there are set levels of citation or set levels of fines for the valuation of the tree? Or would it be the actual valuation of the tree damaged or removed? Because as this notes, some very specific trees can appraise for over $100,000. $100,000 would be a very steep penalty on someone. Maybe not a couple of our colleagues, but certainly on most of us. And very good for them, I might say. So I just wanted some clarity on that as well.
Thank you, Council Member. So the way that this would work is similar to when you are like the victim of a car accident. You receive a letter essentially saying that victims' rights compensation is available to you. Obviously, the city wants to work with people. Often, and speaking with the city forester, really what we're looking for is tree replacement. So that could be replacing, a very old tree with, let's say, 3 new 2-inch trees, which would be much cheaper than what that tree was actually valued at. But ultimately, there would be due process rights for that. So if the city was to claim, let's say we were asking for about $600 to plant 3 new trees, and the citizen wanted to contest that amount, they would get a hearing in front of the judge, and the judge would ultimately determine what actual out-of-pocket damages the city has suffered as a result of the tree being cut down. So certainly there'd be due process involved, and the judge would determine that, but hopefully we could work it out with citizens so that we are just able to replace trees that obviously contribute to the great city which we live.
Wonderful, thank you. That sounds great. If there's no other request, Mayor, I'll make the motion.
You may.
All right. I move that CB 21-013, an ordinance repealing and reenacting Article 6 of Chapter 38, Environment of the Arvada City Code, be approved on final reading numbered 4760 and ordered published by title only.
Motions for approval. Mr. Pfeiffer, how do you vote?
Yeah, and I'm glad to see this because that tree actually, I think, was a big problem, I believe, in Westwood. So there was an actual case. So I'm glad to see clarity around it. And yes, I'm absolutely for this.
Ms. Ford?
Yes, I too am absolutely for this. We had a tree stolen, damaged out of the Arvada Volunteer Firefighters Park. And those trees really are very valuable to the people who do enjoy the park. So I'm very happy that we have this now. And also because there are many cases where people do not trim trees high enough where people on bicycles can move through them without getting hit in the head. Or even for those of us tall people, right, Bob, who walk under the trees, it's nice when people trim their trees and have them above people's heads, and this gives the city a lot of good leeway for that.
Very good. And displaying the remaining votes, the 5 in chambers have voted yes as well, so that passes 7-0. Just as a footnote to Gordon Ruzik's comments, the park in my neighborhood has a bocce ball court for the very reason that the citizens there that's an amenity they wanted to have, and so I would encourage, and maybe we ought to put it on the website, that hey, if you're really wanting to have these kind of amenities, these are the processes to go through to try to get them added. So, okay, with that, I will open the public hearing on Council Bill 2114, an ordinance authorizing an additional appropriation for fiscal year 2021. I see Brian Archer is coming to the podium. He is our rock star when it comes to financial matters, so I'm sitting here with bated breath to hear your presentation.
Mayor, Council, very nice to see you all in person. I think this is the first time in a while.
We've missed you.
I've missed you too.
Oh, gosh.
You're not buying it? Oh, boy.
Straight face.
Yeah. So, thank you. We would like to take the opportunity tonight to go ahead and go over our fourth quarter report at the same time as we go over this carryover ordinance. So I will launch right in. Next slide, please. Mayor and Council, last time we presented to you was the third quarter report. That was in November. And we felt like revenues would end up in the positive, and they did. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Expenditures did end up in line with the budget. We do want to celebrate some successes related to the CARES Act tonight. And as you all are well aware, the COVID-19 pandemic is still front and center. We're hoping that we see a light at the end of the tunnel. I think, Mayor, the last time we said that, you said it was hopefully not a train. I think that was a year ago. So, next slide, please. We do like to celebrate some of the accomplishments of my teammates. Last year, you will remember, we spent about $6 million on the concrete and milling and overlay program. That was because we were getting ready for this year and next year. By putting concrete in advance, it allows us to have the warranty period expire before we put the asphalt in. Asphalt's also much more expensive, and so this year we spent a little more than $13 million. We processed over 41,000 sales tax returns from 7,660 businesses that produced $67 million in sales tax revenue. Issued 285 total building permits, predominantly single-family and duplex. As you see, no commercial permits in 2020. That did have an effect on our building use tax, but our overall building revenue did exceed our budget. Next slide. Our police department continues to make tremendous progress on what was quite a lofty goal just a few years ago, and that was to get to 80% of priority 01 calls in under 5 minutes. One of our 4 sectors has achieved this. The other 3 made significant improvements, and my guess is if they continue, this will be completed by next year. Our unemployment did move up. If you remember, in the third quarter, this number was close to 10. It did come down a little bit in the fourth quarter, which is nice. It has continued to come down each and every month. We usually the upside and the downside, the national and the state of Colorado. And 13 of our 15 funds meet or exceed the fund balance goal. The 2 funds that do not, Arvada Events, which is now closed. We will need to bring formal action to City Council to remove that because that is one of the funds that is in your list. That will be a cleanup we will work with the legal department on. The other fund is the golf fund, and that does not meet it currently, but does meet it in our 10-year plan. And if you remember during the process to create the new clubhouse out there, we knew we were going to be below our fund balance goal for a period of time. They've worked tremendously hard, and we'll talk about that here in just a bit, and we're getting closer and closer each year to getting that goal underway in the current period. Next slide. This is a graphical representation of the general fund, the 17% goal that's been established by City Council. As you can see, we're still well above that goal. We do use a lot of these funds in balancing our 10-year plan, but currently sit at a little over 42% of our annual expenditures in reserve. That does allow us to be much more flexible in times like what we just went through. It is a little restrictive in your 10-year financial plan, and it is conservative. Next slide. A couple of slides on performance. I won't read these to you. This relates to accessibility and convenience on our roads. Next slide. This one relates to hits on our CSI investigations. Both areas trending very good, a little bit lower on this one last year, but the trend this year has gone right back up. Next slide. To celebrate a little bit around our CARES Act, we were provided approximately $9.4 million from Jeffco and Adams County as a pass-through from the federal government. This is how these dollars were allocated. If you combine the businesses, nonprofits, and housing and human services, over 500 different individuals, businesses, et cetera, received funding. As you can see, a vast majority of the funding went to businesses and to nonprofits, a little bit of the funding to housing and human services, and what amounts to about 19% used internally, and that use was to prepare for the COVID-19. None of those dollars were used for salaries or any other offsetting items. We did get all of these dollars out by December 31st, and our final grant was approved both by Jeffco and Adams, so good things to celebrate. And it took the entire organization and outside the organization to make this happen. Next slide. Jumping in the general fund really quickly, as you can see, many positives on this list. We're quite excited. Just 2 negatives, use tax, which we just talked a little bit about. That deals with reinvestment by businesses. Many businesses were doing everything they can to stay afloat last year, did not have the opportunity to reinvest. We're expecting that number to grow back in the upcoming years. And then courts, of course, was closed for most of last year, so it makes it very difficult. And again, court revenue is not something that we try to generate. It is something that is just generated as part of their daily activities. Next slide. If we dig a little bit deeper into sales tax, you'll see that we had quite a large growth in sales tax in 2020, 9.1%, which is the largest growth since I've been here. I've been here a very long time. And we were grateful to be positioned where we were in 2020. A lot of essential buying in Arvada. We have large essential businesses. We talked a little bit about this in the third quarter. We will be eliminating this slide moving forward because we do not track these categories anymore. Next slide. We now track by NAICS codes. We talked to City Council about this a year ago. We kept the prior slide on for 2020 only for comparative purposes. We will be coming up with a new slide this year. I want to draw your attention to a few different areas. Number one, supermarkets, grocery stores, wholesalers, large growth year over year. Also a very large growth in electronic shopping. You can see that that pattern started, if we went back a little bit further, it started in 2016. It's grown every year. 2018, 2019, pretty good growth. From 19 to 20, significant growth, almost 80%. A lot of that had to do with the Marketplace Facilitator Act, which was passed in September. Also, a lot of this had to do with changing habits. Many people were unable to buy their goods in person, so they ordered them. You do know that Arvada does not have a mall. So if you were to buy your favorite pair of shoes that you normally went to Flatirons, but you ordered it in 2020 delivered to your house, we now received that sales tax. Prior to that, Broomfield or Westminster would receive that sales tax. We're expecting that number to pull back a little bit, but it has not pulled back as much as we thought. The first couple of months this year, people are continuing the same shopping habits they started last year. Things are being delivered. You'll also notice that our full-service restaurants did everything they could to claw back to a 20% reduction. That's still significant. They're still struggling, but they are doing everything they can. And as you move down the page, you will see some other areas that stand out, but their revenues are much smaller. Next slide. Auto use surprised us, and that's why I put it back up here. If you remember in the third quarter, we brought this to you expecting this to be a loss. Lots of people purchased cars in the fourth quarter. Lots of residents of Arvada purchased cars in the fourth quarter, and we saw significant growth. It moved from a loss to an increase, 4.1%. Normal estimate on this is between 2 and 3%. So, caught off guard a little bit. We are seeing a very slow start to the year, so we think a bunch of people bought early. Maybe the deals were quite good. I don't know. Next slide. General use tax, just a graphical representation of what we've already talked about. We are expecting a rebound. Next slide. Quick run through of our other funds. As you can see, the Parks Fund is all green. Open space revenues did stay high. They were able to control their costs, and therefore fund balance still looks very good. Tax increment funds also felt the same increase in sales tax and auto use tax as a general fund. So their revenues are positive. They did a wonderful job controlling costs. We did put a monitor light on their year-to-date and their fund balance. This is because we received a grant for 4 police officers. I think you may remember that from last year. We've been able to fund those for part of the 10-year model, but we need to complete that funding. So just wanted to make sure that that wasn't lost. Community development and housing both did a wonderful job on the revenue and expenditure side. Capital projects, our funding was consistent for all of 2020. We did put a monitor light on the expenditures and on the fund balance. Expenditures continue to grow. The fund balance, we had to use some of our reserve to help offset a couple of costs. We like to shoot for a 10% reserve. We're not quite there. So we'll continue to work on that. Water fund has a monitor light on revenues. While they did meet their budget, they met it in a little bit different ways this year. Tap fees were down. Water usage was up. And interest revenue was up. Moving forward, we know that we're going to have to address some of the revenues in the utilities funds, specifically the water fund. The city is nearing build-out, and we're going to have to figure different revenue sources for capital. Historically, we've used tap fees. Those are going to run out when we're completely built, and so we're going to have to look at different ways to fund the ongoing enterprise. On May the 10th, Director of Utilities Sharon Israel will come to present some ideas that we have for this water fund. Wastewater, you will see, has a red light, and that was because their revenues were down. But overall, their fund balance and their expenditures are fine. Stormwater was fine. Golf course, we've talked about this before, is kind of a tale of 2 different operations. Councilmember Merritt?
Yeah, can I hold you up real quick,
Yes,
since you were just talking about the wastewater fund? I just have a question for you about it. I was looking at the fourth quarter results, and the thing that kind of caught my eye was that our water charges was actually up.
Yep.
But our charges for sewer charges was actually down.
Yes.
But our payments to the Metro District for treatment of it was about flat.
Yeah.
I thought our billing system was set that you billed on sewer based on how much water you use. So
it is.
How do you use more water and not
Yeah.
get a bigger bill for sewer charges unless there's less of it going down the drain? But if that's the case, shouldn't we be paying Metro less? Like, it seems like
it is
there's
kind
misalignment of some of those
It is a little bit of a
factors.
misalignment, and years ago, the decision was made to set the sewer rates at the 2 lowest flow rates, which are usually December and January, and sometimes that doesn't then match up. So it takes a year to catch up. So we just set sewer rates, and they'll be behind. And so that's why it takes, so it does look awkward.
Right.
If we did it instantaneously like you described, it would be better, but that's not how it's.
Right, and when we look at and set those sewer rates, are we setting them based on what happened last year, or are we setting them based on what happened last year plus an anticipation of what might happen going forward, or are we always behind on that?
We're always behind.
Always behind, okay, thank you.
In the golf fund, it's really a tale of two operations. We've talked about this before. Golf has been tremendously busy. They've seen a growth pattern much similar to what happened when Tiger Woods came on the scene and everybody wanted to learn how to play golf. It was one of the few things that people could get outside and do. And so for you that play golf, you will realize that it's back to the old days where you have to book quite far in advance to be able to get on any course. And that's been wonderful. The restaurant faced these same challenges as any business has been facing. Limited capacity, limited ability to serve, and so their revenues were obviously significantly down. And we did put the monitor light on, and we talked about that already. And our risk fund made it through the year unscathed. Next slide.
Brian, I have a question on the golf restaurants. Would they have been able, like a regular restaurant, to do a lot of takeout or, food cart type?
Yes.
Food in the future, so that, if we had something like this again, that it wouldn't just shut down, but, could provide some other options for providing food and drink.
Councilmember Ford, they did run a takeout operation at both courses, predominantly at Westwoods, a little bit lighter at Lake Arbor, and we're working on perfecting that throughout the period of time. I don't know if they're going to continue that practice moving forward. I know they were researching it and trying to decide if it would be beneficial or not.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Last slide is related to investments. We had an interesting year. As many of you know, the federal funds rate got taken to basically zero in April and May of last year. I do want to point out something that we put in play about 4.5 years ago, and that was using a third party to do some of our longer term investing. And so that was done for specifically a period of time like this, because it's an actively managed investment pool. They can go out further on the ladder and enables them to be more responsive. We have a buy and hold philosophy here at the city, and we have a much shorter duration. And so we're much more affected by interest rates going down and interest rates going up. So you can see in that first chart, they had significant growth. PFM had significant growth in their investment portfolio as compared to the prior year because they were further out. And so it's a little counterintuitive, but when interest rates go up, bond values go down. But when interest rates go down, bond values go up. And so they were able to take their bonds that had a higher interest rate and roll them out further. The bonds that had the lower interest rate, they were able to sell at a premium. And so hopefully that interest rates will return, though it sounds like they have no intentions of even thinking about moving forward with any rates. So we're going to see a lower environment on the city funds for a while. Next slide. So there's our fourth quarter report. Are there any questions?
Ms. Miller.
Concerns?
Thank you, Mr. Archer. Appreciate your report as always. I just have a quick question on the money that we gave to nonprofits. Is it possible to get a list of the nonprofits that we gave that funding to, and how did we pick those nonprofits? Did they apply for it, or did we pick it based on needs that we know?
So the answer to your question is absolutely we can create a list. I actually literally just emailed my team right before I came up here and said that I was embarrassed that I didn't bring that. And second, the answer was both. So we reached out to some reached out to us. We kind of went through a process with our leadership team and came up with values and dollars that we felt comfortable with, and then moved on. Each one of the nonprofits had to present to us how they were going to use the funds. They then had to work with our legal department and sign an agreement. Technically, some of them was an IGA, some of them were just an agreement. And then we monitored that throughout the period of time, had to collect receipts on all of the usage, and then turn it in.
Thank you, and I appreciate all of the work that your team did and legal did on all of this CARES Act funding, because I know that it was an incredible lift, and you guys are fantastic.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Archer, I don't see any other questions. You can move into the 2021 budget ordinance.
Okay. You don't need a break or
Nope, we're good.
stretch.
Just keep moving, man. You got it.
Okay, so we're here to ask approval of our first budget ordinance of 2021. Next slide. So we try to accomplish three things with this ordinance each year. We have 2020 items that we call carryovers, and these are items that City Council approved as part of the 2020 budget way back in 2019. Some of these projects or programs where we were unable to complete, and we would like to carry them forward and get them done. The next is related to our one-time items. We're going to go into a little bit further of a discussion about one-time items this year. But historically, we calculate the difference between our revenue and our budgeted revenue, our expenditures and our budget expenditures, and bring that to City Council with a list of items that were identified as priorities, but maybe we didn't have a funding source. And then we ask City Council if they would like to approve any of those. And then finally, we always have some items that fall outside of the budget approval process from August to this period of time that we'd like to bring to City Council that are new. Next slide. So the total carryover is a little over 32.5 million, a large number. But when you break that down, you will notice that our enterprise funds make up approximately 28 million of that number. And the reason behind that is, as part of government accounting, we're required to re-budget every year for enterprise funds, everything, not just operations, but capital as well. In government accounting, you're able to just budget for a project one time and carry it through to the end of the project. For enterprise or fiscal budgeting, each year you have to reappropriate. So you'll see things on here like the Denver Water Project or the Ralston Treatment Plant, which you've approved now for the third year in a row, but it's the little pieces as we started with a larger budget and it continues to go down and down and down. And so that is the majority of what we're asking for on the carryover. Next slide. A little bit of detail on the general fund. The actual specifics were included in the ordinance. If you have any questions about any of those individuals, I have a few phone a friends that can help me on that. Otherwise, it's relatively small when you consider we have an $80 million general fund operation. We're asking to carry forward about $900,000. And many of these, again, are also projects that were planned in 2020, but because of what was going on, we weren't able to complete them. As you notice down below, that's a summation of all the other funds with approximately 28 million towards capital, some very small street maintenance, and then some carryover ordering related to equipment and vehicles. Under operations on the other funds, this is related to two main operations, one being our what they call CIPP or cured in place. I'm missing one of the P's.
Cured in place.
Pipe?
I think it's cured in place projects, or cured in place pipes.
Pipes, yeah. So that's the sewer that we've talked about for years, that they had a large contract that they're finishing up on that, and then we also had some water main programs that we were finishing up. Next slide. As far as the one-time goes...
I have a quick question on the fluoride treatment. Could someone tell me, or would someone tell me, please, when is the deadline on that, or our goal for that to be completed?
Councilmember Ford, are you asking whether or not the fluoride treatment is now operational?
Yes.
It is.
Oh, it is. Okay, so that was completed. Okay, thank you. Just had to remember.
Only two one-time items that we would like to bring to City Council. One is related to the Visitor Center and an ongoing funding request that they've presented, and another is related to some legal expenditures that we have for both of our two bond programs related to some of the work that they need to do and some other outside legal counsel. And historically, the city attorney has brought these to you as one-offs, but we decided to go ahead and bring them as one group tonight. Next slide. And then new requests, about 8.6 million. Again, many of these are routine in nature. They're items that we do every year, and a few of them are a little unique. So for example, the vehicles, we're trying to get ahead of an ordering process that we've been told now could take up to 18 months to get certain vehicles ordered. And so we're ordering these right away. If we get lucky and they come this year, we'll spend these dollars right away. If not, we may end up having to bring this back to you again next year.
I still don't see City Council's helicopter in here.
It's right below that total.
Oh.
Next slide. A little more detail on the new requests. Again, predominantly capital projects and some vehicle purchases with a little bit in operations. And the detail for all of these is included in your packet. Next slide. We do want to talk a little bit about where we calculate and how we come up with our one-time funds. And so I already did the overview, and you can see this year, sales tax, auto use, and our building revenues are the revenues that exceeded our budget. If you add everything else up, we were basically right at our budget. And so all of our other revenue sources either were up or down, but we were really underestimated sales tax, auto use tax, and building activity. Historically, we budget only at the amount we need to cover our ongoing operations, and anything above that becomes one time. On the expenditure side, we had quite a large savings. As an organization, we did a really good job hunkering down. And so if you take the carryover out of that, it leaves about $5 million. You add those two together, we had about $10.7 million in savings. It was a pretty big number. We were proposing tonight to use $550,000 in one time, about $2.5 million in new requests. So normally, we would be really excited right now, and I would be doing backflips and telling City Council you have $7.6 million to spend. The problem is, last year when we created our 10-year model, we had to do a lot to help reduce, or I think Mr. Devon coined this, a soft landing in the changes that we were trying to make. And so I did want to remind City Council some of those items that we made and some of the things we'll be bringing back to you as part of this year's budget update. Next slide. So you can see as part of our 10-year model assumptions, we proposed to eliminate 3 positions in 2023. We were going to move some of our engineers from the general fund over into the CIP fund, and ultimately that would mean that we would have less dollars available to spend towards projects. Today, 100% of our money that goes over to CIP is spent on the project. We do not pay for any of our engineers out of those. The practice is to pay for about 20% normally. We fought that for a long time here. We kind of took that step in that direction last year. We'd like to really unwind that if we could. We talked already about the 4 police officers. We did create a complete salary freeze in 2024. We did adjust healthcare to a cost to the general fund and the other funds. We did freeze steps and SRAs for 2021. We've already unwound the 2021 steps, and that will be provided to our employees next pay period. But you can see if we go ahead and take the SRA out of 2021, we still have about 19 million to go. So that 7.5 million is a start. We obviously will be updating our revenues. Sales tax was better than we expected. Auto use tax was better than we expected. And so we'll be able to claw back a bunch of this, if not all of this, and maybe still end up with some one-time dollars. And we will still be bringing that back to City Council. The other thing that we wanted to do is maximize the dollars that we were going to receive from the American Rescue Plan. So we now know that we're going to get 11.7 million. We still don't know exactly what that can go towards. We have a rough idea, but we want to make sure that if something that was in our one-time plan could actually be paid for with those dollars, we would pay for it with those dollars and then reallocate dollars from our one-time plan. Next slide. We also have some items coming up that we need to deal with. We cut approximately 6.8 million in line items. We took all of the urban renewal funding from 2028 to 2030 and put it in the plan. In 2028, Ralston Fields ends, and so the city will receive 100% of the revenue that's currently going to the urban renewal. We've been trying to reserve those funds and keep them separate and not part of our operations so that when we get closer, those can be spent on a larger capital project or growing our operations whatever's appropriate when we get there. But we've been trying to reserve them. We did put them in the plan. We'd like to take them back out. And then we know we have body-worn cameras that we need to implement. Now, the costs you see up here are all 10-year costs, not one-year costs. And so you might say, hey, body-worn cameras, that looks really high. But when you take that over 10 years, it's probably pretty close. And then, again, we put question marks on computer security. With everybody working remote or the increased attacks that we're seeing all over, we're hoping to make sure we can harden that system. So again, there's another 17 million. So we will be back to City Council here in the next probably 6 to 8 weeks, presenting hopefully the American Rescue Plan and hopefully what we're going to do with one time. But I can tell you the one-time number will not be 7.6 million. Next slide. So I apologize that I dived down into that a little bit, but just wanted to get that explanation out. So any questions?
Very good. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you. Brian, I have a question for you. One of the things that we allocated one-time funds to in the past, I think this may have been about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, was funding AIDA, or Economic Development. And I believe, if I'm recalling correctly at the time, we funded them to about half of what their request was, or what we thought they should be funded to, and be figuring on using one-time funds for that. And so I don't see it in this time's one-time funds allocation, and I think I understand why as we go forward. We're just not there ready to do that yet. But I just wanted to call that out and make sure that we kept that on there. You know, I know for my business is the same way, and when times get tough, it's easiest to cut out your marketing budget first, because you kind of you don't always have a direct link there. But the reality is you almost need to expand your marketing budget, or expand your economic development budget in hard times. And I think it's one of the reasons why we have done so much better than some of our similarly situated neighbors during this, both the economic downturn before the pandemic and during this pandemic. So just wanted to call that out. And then I did have a question for you about on our 10-year model. You know, since the last time we talked about our 10-year model and budgeting, one thing has happened, and that is the Gallagher Amendment was repealed from the state constitution. And it's my belief that that will lead to significantly higher property tax revenues for those institutions that are debruced, like the city. Now, granted, we collect a small property tax increment, but have we built in increases going forward since this past fall when Gallagher was repealed, or is that something we'll take up in our next budgeting process?
Correct. That's something we'll work on in the next budgeting process. We will see an increase, because it will depend on what the split looks like between residential and commercial, obviously. And being a predominantly residential city, we're probably going to see that number grow. So we'll be making that adjustment with this budget cycle.
Right.
So that's not included in anything yet.
Correct. And as we carry that forward in our 10-year model, that gives an opportunity to erase some of those things that we've done to create that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for answering that question. And then I just wanted to make one other comment or one more observation in looking at not necessarily this particular action with these one-time funds, but in looking at our sales tax revenue. You know, the electronic sales tax revenue is definitely a very big bright spot. And you know, in my time here on council, we went from collecting essentially zero to now it's a significant, you know, it's 6-7% of our sales tax revenue. It's become a significant thing, and that's kind of reflective of changing habits within our community, reflective of changing the way we do business. But there are offsets too, and the one I would call out is the cable TV PEG fees, which you know, as our city has grown, as cable TV has gotten more expensive, our PEG fees continue to drop, and they're now under $1 million annually. And you know, I don't know what they were, but I think when I started on council, they were a couple $1 million.
That's correct.
And so even though we see some increases due to changing way we all do business, we see some decreases due to the changing way we all do business. And just want to compliment you guys on the way that we do that 10-year budgeting and the conservative nature that we do it, because I think it catches those a long way out and allows us to plan prudently and properly for what happens with those. So, kudos to you guys for catching those things.
Thank you.
Very good. Kristen Rush, do we have any member of the public that wants to speak to us about this ordinance?
We do not.
Okay, I'll close the public comment portion, open it up for City Council. Additional questions or action? Mr. Marriott.
I'll make the motion, Mayor, if no one else.
That's fine. Please do.
All right. Hold on one sec. I move that CB 21-014, an ordinance authorizing an additional appropriation for fiscal year 2021, be approved on final reading, numbered 4761, and ordered published by title only.
Motions for approval. Mr. Pfeiffer, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ford?
Yes.
Rest of council votes yes as well. That passes 7-0. Let me add my appreciation to you and your team. Brian, I think that our conservative approach got us through some pretty tough times. You talk to other communities and, frankly, if they had done as well as we had, they wouldn't be hurting the way they are. So congratulations and thank you for presenting this information. I'll open the last public hearing on Council Bill 21015, an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Arvada and Jefferson County School District number R1 relating to street improvements to Ralston Road, public project number 18ST40. Mr. Devin, who are you going to have make this presentation so we don't have to listen to you?
Sorry.
I thought it was great having Anessa do the first one. So.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what is before you tonight is an intergovernmental agreement that essentially replaces some parking that we are taking as part of the Ralston Road Phase 2 project, and also add some enhancements to Wolf Park. That's what's before you tonight at a cost of $170,000. The $70,000 of that cost is going to be shouldered by the project, and $100,000 is going to be funded by ORA, with that part of that money coming out of the $3.5 million that had been earlier agreed to between the city and ORA as part of the streetscape improvements. So those improvements are essentially going to be focused on Wolf Park, the enhancements to Wolf Park. This is a collaborative approach to working with the school district. We had to acquire the right-of-way necessary to accommodate the widening of Ralston Road, and in doing so, we took some parking spaces away. So we worked with the school district to bring those parking spaces back, and we're actually adding additional spaces as part of this project. So it's definitely a win-win, and we're recommending the approval of the intergovernmental agreement as recommended.
Very good. Kristen Rush, is there any member of the public that wishes to address us on this matter?
There is not.
Thank you. We'll close the public comment portion, open it up for City Council question or action. I'll start with a comment. For those of us who have been around for a while, and we probably should have gotten a lot of pictures of this, there used to be an ugly chain link fence along Ralston Road there where Wolf Park is now that was just horrible. And as part of the creation of Wolf Park and now what we're going to do with this project, that is a beautification of that stretch that it took something that was really an eyesore and made it into something pretty incredible. And what's going to happen with the streetscape is going to make it even more special. So with that, Mr. Marriott.
Thank you. I move that CB 21-015, an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Arvada and Jefferson County School District number R1 relating to street improvements to Ralston Road, public project number 18-ST-40, be approved on final reading numbered 4762 and ordered published by title only. And I'll make a comment as well, given that this is right here in my neighborhood. Again, thanks to the school district for entering into this intergovernmental agreement. I believe the school district will benefit from this improvement on Ralston Road with safety around the school, and of course we're enhancing their parking there around the school and bus safety. So those are all very good things for them. But this project particularly is a really good thing for not only this neighborhood, but everyone in Arvada, particularly those who want to get east and west. And again, shows a great amount of collaboration and cooperation amongst certain organizations within the city and out. Jeffco Public Schools one, but the Arvada Urban Renewal Authority, who is contributing to the streetscape and beautification along this corridor. And Mr. Mayor, I agree with you very much. I used to run the track there at what's now Wolf Park behind that ugly fence, and it is so superior now. And one of the things that really makes Arvada what it is the ability to do these things and do them in a collaborative way that benefits us all. So for all those reasons, I will certainly be voting yes.
Okay, Mr. Pfeiffer, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ford?
Yes.
And we have 5 votes yes in the city council chambers. That passes unanimously. That closes out our public hearings for tonight. Kristen Rush, do we have anybody that wishes to address this during public comment?
We do not.
I'll close that public comment portion. Any city council reports?
Yes, Mayor, I have a report that I'd like to give.
Go ahead.
It is with sadness that I wanted to acknowledge a dear friend of mine, David W. Hendricks, who lived here in Arvada after he retired from CSU as a water engineer and author. And he passed away last Tuesday peacefully in his sleep. David was very active in Arvada. He and another David, as part of their neighborhood in Meadow Glen, were part of creating the forest of trees along 80th Ave. And he came to several of our city council meetings and was a ardent supporter and he was very faithful in attending my District 1 meetings as well, and he'll be missed.
Well, thank you for that, and sorry for the loss. Ms. Simpson?
Thank you. I wanted to give a quick update. Councilmember Pfeiffer and I had a recent meeting with the Arvada Fire Board. They have some exciting stuff going on, including purchasing of equipment for protection of wildfires that could potentially even be used in other communities, which is great. They are working on the mental health responder program, which I am especially proud of. It's really important because it handles some of those calls in a discreet manner so that, people aren't re-traumatized or aggravated by sirens and other things. And then in recognition of all of their incredible work, the Fire Protection District has recently rated an ISO 1 effective, which for those who don't know what that is, it's a recognition that nationwide any fire protection district can achieve, and less than 1% of the fire departments in the nation have this top rating. So we truly do have one of the absolute best fire departments in the nation. That's not just us talking, it's proven. So just a huge congratulations to the fire district, to Chief Piper, and to the fire board, and to everyone who works so hard to serve us every day. And they're essential workers, and I know we have a proclamation coming up very soon for essential workers and all that they do for us. So thank you.
Right. Mr. Devon, on that note, I assume that as we're having the discussions with regard to the semi-permanent street closures in Old Town, that we'll have discussions with the fire department. I think it was Ms. Miller that did some quick research that there's some smaller fire trucks that would be more suitable for that kind of a setting. So I assume those discussions will be going forward.
They are.
Very good. Okay, I see no other lights. Mr. Devon, anything you want to report on other than your mayor keeps abusing you by making fun of you inappropriately?
Oh,
you're used to it.
I am used to it. Next Monday, we will be presenting to the City Council the Charter Review Committee report. We will also provide you with a update on our bond projects, and we will also present to you a proposal for ordinance changes in association with enforcement and regulation of tobacco and vaping.
Very good. That one's been long waited for, so. Rachel Morris, do you have anything for us tonight?
Nothing from me, Your Honor.
Very good. We stand adjourned. Thank you.